For the honor of Grayskull! I am She-Ra! Only a few others share this secret. Among them are Lighthope, Madame Raz, and Cowl. Together, we and my friends of the Great Rebellion strive to free Etheria from the evil forces of Hordak!
Hi everyone, Angel here. So first off, apologies for this being a narration. It's Sunday morning and I'm being lazy by not wanting to do my hair and makeup. So instead, I'm going to talk over some images and videos that I've found of the show I'm about to talk about. I'm going to talk about the new She-Ra reboot that has just come out. So firstly, spoiler alert. Secondly, I've not only waited until the Saturday after it came out to binge watch all of the episodes in one go, which was yesterday, but I have also avoided all of the reviews since the show was released. I'm aware that there have been some opinions about the show. I mean, I can read titles, and YouTube have brought up several reviews as suggestions for me, but I've not watched any of these, with the exception of the Black Nerd, who admitted that he had the opportunity to watch the first 2 episodes long before a special screening, but he didn't really say much about the show itself. The first thing I would like to address and get out of the way is the so-called controversy surrounding the show. I want to make it very clear that the controversy itself was not surrounding the show. Yes, some fans had some reservations about the new designs. They're bound to. The new She-Ra in most of the promo shots is completely flat-chested, and aside from her long hair held in a ponytail as Adora, she could easily be considered a boy. Again, this in itself is not the controversy that is the issue. The issue people had is with the creators' reaction to the criticism itself. They responded with hate towards the original fans. They stated that the show was not made for the fans of the original, and anyone who preferred the original design was not a true fan of the original show. Lastly, they stated that the body designs were more natural than the original designs were. Well, yeah, this could be true. Now, the issue I have with this is A, I find their reactions to the old fans very childish and leads to people worrying about the show itself and whether the writing's going to be any good if they're concentrating on such arguments. And B, I myself am an hourglass figure. This is essentially the figure She-Ra had in the original. Obviously, her figure was slightly more extreme. So to me, they are saying that even when I was skinny, my figure was not natural. So I was even hurt a little bit by the comments to a certain extent. Following on from this, and since I've seen the show, I've noted that actually there is very little in the way of upper chests in this show, despite having plus-size characters in this. And girls, we all know that as we get bigger, generally our boobs grow. So there are going to be boobs on bigger girls. So again, this seems to, given their comments about more natural body types, deny anyone who has a naturally large chest. I used to be a size 6 when I worked with horses, and I still couldn't fit into the She-Ra costumes you could buy off the rack. Obviously, this was before I got into cosplay and began making my costumes, but you get the idea. So there is no controversy over the show itself, just the ridiculous way in which the creators dealt with the criticisms they should have known would come their way. I mean, seriously, geeks are going to criticize, especially when you reboot a beloved show like She-Ra. So the show itself is still set in Etheria. You have all the same characters as we had in the previous shows. FYI, this is a spoiler bit. They all look quite different, and while I had originally thought the animation was like Steven Universe, now that I've actually watched the show, I'm leaning more towards an Avatar animation, as in The Last Airbender, not the Blue Smurfs rubbish. This would explain the body designs to a certain extent, as those shows don't have much in the way of boobage either. You follow Adora and the relationship she has at first with the members of the Horde, and then the members of the Rebellion. As with the original, she is essentially brainwashed. The big difference is that Adora never left the Fright Zone in this new version, which has eliminated the need for Shadow Weaver to use her magic to control her. Here they show how children can be easily persuaded that their loved ones can be right when in fact they're very wrong. The story quickly progresses to Adora finding the sword and meeting the Rebellion. She quickly sees the wrong that is about the Horde and what she has been taught, and of course she turns into She-Ra. Now, the transformation sequence doesn't really come in at first, but when it does come into show, it does make me think of Sailor Moon quite a bit, actually. It's your pretty standard magical girl transformation and is clearly inspired by anime transformations. I think this is what they were going for the intro as well, but they didn't quite pull it off and kind of reminds me of shows like Starla and the Jewel Riders and Winx Club. Unlike the original show, where the only real running storyline was the first 4 episodes that were turned into the film The Secret of the Sword, the entire series was a running narrative. This first series, and there is suggestion that they intend to make more, is basically how Adora becomes She-Ra, her gathering the Princess of Power and establishing the basic story and characters themselves. It's not the strongest storyline, but it's also passable. Now onto the princesses. By far my favourite princess is Entrapta. She is the geek of the group and doesn't seem quite all there, and she's the most anime-esque design of the princesses, especially with her massive pigtails. She reminds me a little bit of Saya Takagi from the High School of the Dead show, but with a lot more hair. Or maybe even Washu from Tenchi Muyo. Either way, she's a fun character, and I do enjoy when she's on the screen. The other princesses are okay, and are and aren't your usual stereotypes. Confusing, I know, but let me explain. First, you have Perfumer, who has the power over plants. Basically, the poison ivy of the She-Ra world. Unlike Ivy, she's your stereotypical flower power type. She's kind of like the Californian hippie girl, as are the people she rules. She doesn't take up arms, but it takes persuading by the main antagonist to get her to fight for people and what's theirs. When she does, she seems to like it a lot. But then you have Mamista. This character is the grumpy teen type with a voice to match. She will help, but everything seems an effort to her, and that's where we meet Seahawk. More about him later, but she seems to be fond of Seahawk and plays the too cool for school thing. She can control water, but I feel they really didn't explore her character enough, and I would like to see that explored in more future series if we get one. Next is Froster. We barely get to see anything of this little pipe-sized cutie pie. They make a point of ensuring we know her age. I mean, she literally shouts it. She's not short, she's literally a kid. She's your usual, underestimated, overpowered character with a don't mess with me attitude. She's also quick to assume and quick to be offended. We get even less character development with her than we did with Mista, which is a shame because she reminds me of characters like Toph, where there is some real potential to create a really well-rounded, loved character with this little kid. Glimmer is next. Now, she is one of the main antagonists, and she is Queen Angela's daughter, as in the original show. Her relationship with her mother is a bit of a cliche. While I do enjoy it, I can see that this is also a little overdone in many shows. The difference here is Glimmer has been made one of her mother's generals, but of course her mother is overprotective and only posts her daughter in supposedly low-risk areas. This brings me to something that has bothered me a lot whilst watching this show. They only make one character's age obvious by literally telling us. Otherwise, we're left to assume their age. Given the way Angela treats her daughter, you would expect her to be quite young, maybe 16 at most. This is the same with Bo and Adora. I will touch on the age situation a little later, but for now, I will discuss the other characters. Spinnerella and Netossa, I have grouped these two together because the show has. Again, you don't know much about the pair, apart from the fact that Glimmer informs us that they are dating, and that Netossa makes you aware that she knows her name is kind of silly. It's a running joke that the main antagonists don't know what these two do, and so Netossa points out that the clue is in their names, as in Net, Tossa. Anyway, Brits will probably take that the wrong way. We get no intro into these two. They're just there and shown to be quite sweet to each other, which is nice, but they're just there, which is a shame. The show have tried hard to make this an inclusive show and very sort of LGBT sort of inclusive type thing. But these two just seem to be token lesbians. We don't know anything about them, just that they are lesbian and that they can throw nets and create wind. Oh, and one is plus side. That is it. That's all we know about these two. We don't get any character development from them at all whatsoever. If there's a further series, I'd like to see a bit of character development for them and for them to actually bring this out, make it not obvious. I like that it's not an obvious thing, that it's just touched on, but I'd like to see who they are as people. That's what makes a character, that you have to create a person out of your character. Otherwise, people aren't going to care. I don't care whether they're dating a tree. You know, I want to know who they are as people. Otherwise, I'm not going to care what happens to them. As for the other characters, you have Queen Angela, who has previously said is an overprotective mother. She's also very regal. I have to admit that this version is a vast improvement to the original, whose voice actress made the original character very difficult to put up with on screen due to the wooden delivery. The actress voicing this character is 100% better, and we get to see a lot more of this character in this version. We also do actually get a bit of story arc with this character and her daughter, Glimmer. We get to build a relationship with the pair, and this allows us to give a damn what happens to the two of them when the fighting begins in the penultimate episodes. I mean, come on, it's basic story writing 101. Then you have Bo, who seems to be Glimmer's foil and potentially her love interest. It's certainly implied that Glimmer thinks of Bo in a romantic way in one of the episodes. It's a shame because you don't really actually know much about Bo other than the fact that Angela and her sister-in-law like him, and he's been around since Glimmer was a child. You don't really learn much about him himself. Nothing about his past, where his family is, just that he can shoot arrows from a bow pretty good. And, you know, he seems to serve as the voice of reason in many arguments or battles, though he does serve a purpose. But because they have not gone to the effort of building him as a person, it's still really difficult to care about what happens to him. Seahawk. Where do I start with Seahawk? In the original, he was cast as a potential love interest for Adora. He was campy and jovial at times, but he was more of the serious sort of person compared to this new version. Seahawk in this version is by far my least favourite character. He's incredibly annoying. It's as if they decided to go for the pantomime version of a pirate as opposed to the more traditional pirate. He's constantly bursting into sea shanties, I can't even say it, that are really annoying, and his obsession with Mamista is quite concerning. This is the age thing I mentioned earlier. Mamista seems to be an older teen, yet he is constantly calling himself an old sea captain. He is passed as someone who is much older than most of the characters, and yet he and Mamista seem to warm to each other and even seem to end up together. Perhaps it's them trying to be more inclusive and forward-thinking, but it just seems a little uncomfortable to me that he is clearly so much older than his love interest. But again, they don't really show the ages of the characters, so Mamista might be a lot older than I seem to be getting from her. So, to the entire reason I checked out the original show when I was a kid, Swiftwind! Okay, so this is something that disappointed me more than Seahawk, but I still prefer the character more than the sea captain. We first meet Swiftwind as a regular horse, and this horse appears to be designed in a similar fashion to Bo's horse in the original. Most memorable was this Bo's horse was shown in The Secret of the Sword. They seem to simply find and literally steal this beast and call it Horsey, of all things. Something the show itself pokes fun at later. Unlike the original show, Swiftwind is not Spirit when Adora isn't She-Ra. In fact, once Adora accidentally changes Horsey, I mean, what are we, 3? He remains Swiftwind for the rest of the show, and the change is permanent. He can talk, but as with Seahawk, the voice actor is incredibly over the top, and he keeps harping on about freeing his fellow horses. The design of the Halicorn is pretty, though, and I'm glad they included him. Scorpia is apparently a princess in this also. While this does provide an explanation as to why a magical item is in Hordak's hand, it also just seems like an easy way out to explain the item and a way of getting the high school prom episode into the storyline. She's portrayed as slightly ditzy, and I think that there may well be a romantic thing between her and Catra in the future. I could be wrong, but it certainly feels like that's what they're leading up to. Hordak isn't seen much in this, but this just serves to make him just a little bit more intimidating. His redesign isn't hideous, though. Gone are the muscles, and he's now tall and skinny. He still has his little imp, who is creepy as you know what. Unlike the original, though, he doesn't seem to care about Adora as he did before. He is more interested in taking over all of Etheria. Shadow Weaver is next. Now, this is who actually did take in Adora as a child. But we do not find out what her reasoning is behind this, only that she could see that Adora would grow to be powerful, and Weaver felt that she would be necessary to the Horde. They touch on the relationship between Adora, Catra, and Shadow Weaver and seem happy to show their fear that she brought them up in merely bred resentment. Catra in this version is Adora's best bud, to start with at least. Catra's the last character I'm going to cover is Adora herself. In this version, she is a badass battle-trained teen 1 minute, then a klutzy teen the next. This can be distracting to an older audience, but I don't think the younger kids would necessarily notice. But then this show seems to be more for early to late teens, so the brighter kids might be annoyed with this also. She spends the entire series learning and being the fish out of water, from not being able to sleep on a comfortable bed to never having been to a party before. They tried to make her stick up for the Horde at first, making sure she truly believes that the princesses are the bad guys and the Horde are amazing, supported by the fact that she's never left the Fright Zone, removing the need for Shadow Weaver, to use her magic to control Adora as needed in the original. The most odd change they've made to this character in the show itself is that everyone knows that Adora is She-Ra, which I suppose could explain why they don't feel the need to have Swift Wind change every time she turns into She-Ra. This opens up a friend's danger and is used as a plot point in at least one of the episodes. Before she had to slip away to change into She-Ra, and now she just holds up aloft her sword right in front of even the Horde. In this universe, She-Ra is a legend, and there has been more than one. They also tease about Eternia, making us think that perhaps He-Man might show up in later seasons. But this is only speculation, and possibly just Easter eggs for the old fans just to shut us up. So now I've talked you all to death. What do I think of the show itself? It's okay. It's not groundbreaking. To do that, you would have to do something different. Back in the 80s, that's what the old show did. You had a virtually all-female cast, with some exceptions, to include both heroines and villainesses. Back then, this was unheard of for a kids' action show. In fact, a kids' action show aimed at girls was pretty unheard of at the best times. Yes, as girls could watch Transformers, Thundercats, Ninja Turtles, or Hero Turtles if you're from the UK, because us Brits apparently couldn't cope with the word ninja or even nunchuck scenes. There were female characters in these shows, but most were supporting characters to the main, and some were often there to be rescued. In fact, Transformers didn't get a female robot until the 4th season, and the movie just before that. The show takes She-Ra a little bit further, but to be groundbreaking, you have to be new, and I just don't think they have been. Had this come out before Steven Universe and shows like that, then maybe. The storyline is okay. It has a running storyline and some semblance of an arc. It's pretty bog standard story. It's not good, but I wouldn't call it bad either. All in all, it's worth a watch, but give it a chance. Watch it as its own show, not because you want to compare it to the original. I've done that with both TMNT and My Little Pony and have been pleasantly surprised in most cases. In fact, my most favourite version of TMNT is the 2003 version. Anywho, I hope you liked my review. Comments are welcome below, but please keep it civil. Bye!
For the